To the USD 230 revenue neutral rate hearing. Mr. Swin, did you have a presentation for us?
All right, good evening. I won't take much time because this is intended for the public, not for me. I do have, there she be, a very short slide that's been posted in board docs. As far as the revenue neutral rate hearing, here is a timeline as far as what's been going on regarding the revenue neutral rate. Back on June 15th, the Johnson County emailed us what our revenue neutral rate would be. And then it got revised in July, on July 1, because there was a new state statute that exempted the first 75,000 on the general fund. So that actually, because of that exemption, it raised it to 60.732. And then the board had to take action and approve the max. And you'll see that we approved it on July 8th at 70.496. That is important to note. That does include the rec commission, which was 3.05. If you pull that out, it drops it quite a bit. And then on July 19th, I sent that information on to the county. And then on August 26th, we adopted a notice of hearing that went into the paper. And the proposed tax rate for this evening is 67.210. That does not include the rec commission, and published in the paper on the 28th. And tonight is the hearing. I've mentioned numerous meetings in the past what I believe are some flaws with the revenue neutral rate process, and concerns as far as how much time and energy it takes. When tonight we will actually have a budget hearing that covers everything. But for now, we need to focus on whether or not the district is going to remain revenue neutral or whether they're going to exceed it. To be revenue neutral would require a decrease of 6.7 mils, and that's just not realistic in a district that's rapidly growing. But I will now turn it over to the public, and the public can speak. So.
Wonderful, thank you. Is there anyone that would like to speak on the revenue neutral topic?
I have some questions on it. So you went over here and you said that there's a $75,000 exemption. What is that for?
When you pay your tax bill for your property, for the general fund, which is 20 mils to the state of Kansas, what they're going to do is take 75,000 worth of value off of it before the calculation is made. Prior to July 1, it was only 40,000-ish. So they've upped it to 75,000 to help give some tax relief to people. But that's just on the general fund. Later on, when I get into the budget hearing, you'll see that there's other funds that make up the overall budget.
So can we get to the overall funds so we can develop more questions to ask about the revenue neutral process that you're going through as to what your spending and stuff is going to be before we encounter any additional questions? Or maybe there's some people out here that have questions about it, but it does help to have the numbers and stuff for us to put together to see what you're doing so we can ask informative questions from the board.
I do have copies of the budget the full budget document available. I put some outside on the table if you want to flip through it.
Yeah.
The budget's been posted on our website for a few weeks now, and we went over quite a bit of it in detail a couple weeks ago. So I will go into more detail as far as the overall budget after this hearing concludes. This one is just whether or not we're going to be revenue neutral. And I've shared with the board that is not a realistic expectation for a rapidly growing district. And then the next hearing, we talk about the overall budget and where the money's going.
So you say it's rapidly growing.
Mhm.
Due to what?
More kids.
So that is a tax burden that we're putting on a lot of people, and we don't have too much say if we exceed the revenue neutral process, correct?
I mean, you're here tonight. You can say you're opposed to us exceeding the revenue neutral rate. I can demonstrate very clearly that, if we were trying to remain revenue neutral, it would be a difference of about 3.5 million in the proposed budget tonight. And that would be cutting a lot of staff, a lot of people, classroom sizes would go up. It's just not real. It's not realistic for us to live on the same money we had last year for this year. And that's what the revenue neutral rate's about.
And so the budget for this year, based upon last year's budget, what kind of an increase are you looking at percentage wise?
Percentage wise, I can tell you dollar wise what we're looking at. And I can transfer it into a percentage. But I will say that the budget hearing is kind of where we're going to talk about the overall dollars. Right now, this hearing's just intended on whether or not we're going to be revenue neutral.
Well, that's a good question to tell everybody over here, because there's a lot of people that live on a budget. And I don't know about too many people out here in the audience that if you sit there and say the budget's going to increase by 7 to 10%. I work for the federal government and I only got a 2% raise. That's a big difference, isn't it? So if you want to sit there and raise things by 7%, I only got 2%, I'm 5% in the hole. So it does help to know what the increase is going to be before we sit there and say, yeah, we'd like to keep it at revenue neutral. Anybody disagree with that statement?
All the numbers have been made public. I would have been happy if you would have called me today and said, what's the percent increase? I would calculate, but I can do it real quick.
I can calculate it too. I'll go grab the piece of paper and I ask that I might be able to address you guys again after I go through the numbers.
And I can tell you with the budget book on page 141 is this was what was published in the paper on August 28th. It'll give you a breakdown by fund. It'll show what we spent last year, what we're budgeting for this year. Number wise, you're looking at 40.4 million last year, 46.1 million this year, whatever that difference calculates out to. And then the supplemental general went from 10.3 million to 12 million. So that's up 1.7 million. So those are the two main funds that make up our budget. A lot of the other funds that are listed are transfers from the general fund into that fund. So you could add the two together, get 50.6 million. And now we're at an anticipated 58.1, subtract the difference, divide it by 50.6, and that would be your percentage.
Yeah, I can do it. So
Page 141 on the budget document. In fact, if you want a copy, I got a copy here.
I would like that. But let me ask this question. During the budget process, and you've seen without the increase on the revenue neutral process, did anybody even look at any cuts anywhere that could be made prior to sitting there and saying, this is what we need? Or did anybody say, oh, well, we got this much coming in, thanks to the state of Kansas putting it at revenue neutral? Did we look at any cuts to be made?
We're anticipated to grow over 200 kids, and that means some of the class sizes exceeded what the board has determined in the past, which means we have to hire more teachers to keep class sizes where we would like. Cuts weren't discussed, but limiting the number of staff we hired definitely was discussed. We had to hire staff just to keep up with the growth, but we tried to minimize that as much as possible to be reasonable with this year's budget.
Well, I don't know about you people, but when I have to do my income and balance my checkbook, if I don't have the money nor the income coming in, like I said, I'm a government worker and I'm going to be soon retired. I'm going to be living on a fixed budget. Sounds to me like you will be on a fixed budget with the revenue neutral. Maybe we got to look a little bit harder as to how we handle that situation based upon the money that we have coming in, instead of asking for more. But that's my opinion. I'm going to go back, take a look at the numbers. Anybody else like to speak? I'm done for right now.
All right, thank you. Thank you for coming in. Any other comments?
I agree with the gentleman here in terms of his interpretation of what appears to be going on. And at least from looking at my property assessment, it looks like the school district is asking on an average an 11.4% increase over last year's budget, which is even more if you really look at the revenue neutral numbers. And I hate to disagree with Doug, but if you're indicating that the reason for the increase is to hire more teachers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that deal with the operation of the school district, it's really incorrect, because the majority of your increase is increasing the bond dollars that you're currently collecting. That's a 20.7% increase over last year. And that's the big difference. It has nothing to do with operating budget. And the question to me is, and again, like the gentleman here that works for the government, I've run a university and worked in the university system for 42 years. We've sold a lot of bonds. When you sell a bond, you agree on a rate that you're going to pay the bonds back with. And so it shouldn't be increasing. I don't understand why you need more dollars to pay for the bonds unless you sold more bonds. And as far as I know, you haven't sold more bonds. So I don't understand why you continually raise the amount of dollars that you need to pay the bonds. The city does exactly the same thing. You don't see the city raising the rate on the bonds because they haven't sold any more bonds. So I really question that thinking. Secondly, this year I'm projected to have, if all the taxes that are listed in Johnson County get approved at the rate, my taxes is going to go up $1,000, a little over $1,000. Of that $1,000, 37.1% is the increase by the school district. Why? I just think, like the gentleman indicated, you need to look at where you need to cut. I'm not saying you don't hire any more teachers, but they're certainly fat somewhere. And I assure you, if I could spend probably a month with your budget people, I could find you places to cut the budget. I used to operate a budget of $240 million a year. And we found fat in a lot of places. So I urge you not to go above the revenue neutral rate. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the revenue neutral topic?
Good evening. How are y'all doing? My wife and I just recently moved into the Miami County side of Spring Hill, so it's nice to be here. We appreciate, the community that you guys have built. We're not moving in here and trying to take over things and change the way you guys operate. But we have some concerns, like everybody else, looking at that change year over year, it appears to be pretty large and concerning. Kind of revisiting what Doug was mentioning here, we have an increase in student size. My wife and I understand that. Do you know what the increase is percentage wise? The increase from attendance?
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand your question. The increase in attendance?
So you have an increase in children attending your school year over year. What is that percentage increase?
Yeah, it's going to be around 5%. We're gaining a little over 200 kids.
Okay, so if it's a 5% increase, a 5% increase in tax would make more sense. And I understand it's not a 1-for-1 exchange, but you're asking for more than double that. You're asking almost triple that. And based off the first gentleman here, it should be around a 15 to 16% increase is what you guys are asking for, which is a lot. Is a lot for a 5% increase in student count. Now, my wife and I also homeschool our kids. We don't take advantage of the system. We don't try to manipulate what you guys are doing or not doing. We enjoy spending time with our kids and we enjoy being able to focus their education on their specific needs. And we are able to do so with an autistic daughter. We are able to do so with one of our youngest having reading issues, and my wife has taught her to read, and she's reading 2 grades above her grade level now. So I think with our specific approach, we're able to effectively teach our kids. That being said, we don't get compensated for that. We do so because it's the best thing for them. We've had other children in the public school districts, not in this county, not in this state, that have fell through the cracks. And we didn't want to see that happen for our youngers. That it's not acceptable. But I also don't believe if we brought them into the school district that our children would be pushed to excel, which is why we keep them at home. Financially, I understand you guys need more, but being new to the area, this increases the difference between us keeping our house or having to move because we can't afford it. We're right there on that bubble. It's a big deal. This has a really big impact to a lot of people, not just the 3 or 4 of us sitting here today. So I urge you guys to reconsider and look into it a little further because it's painful for some of us. Thanks.
Thank you for coming in tonight. Any other comments to the Board of Education? All right, if there's no other comments, we'll close the revenue neutral. Okay.
Just one other tidbit of information that hopefully makes an impact on you. About a month ago, one of the subdivisions, Hidden Hills subdivision on 207, stopped constructing of that subdivision. And the reason they gave for not continuing the development was that when they put the pencil to paper, their profit margin wasn't sufficient enough for them to be able to pay the property tax on the development that they have. So they decided to close it down. Hopefully you don't create that because it's going to backfire on you in terms of growth.
Thank you. Any other comments to the Board of Education? Dr. Troll, have you received any correspondence in regarding the revenue neutral rate?
I have received no communications from any patron about the revenue neutral, other than tonight. I did. I spoke to each one, yes.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, if there's no other comments, we'll close the revenue neutral hearing and open the budget for 2024-2025 hearing. Doug, did you have anything for us on that? Yes, okay.
And just one quick comment, whether we exceed the revenue neutral rate by a penny or 4 million, it's either you exceed it or not. And so, you know, we can talk all about maybe trying to trim fat here and there, but to get to the revenue neutral rate, I guarantee you there's not enough fat to get to that number. Like I mentioned, it's close to between $3.5 and $4 million to be revenue neutral. We would need to fire a lot of people really quick to get to that number. So we're 70% people. Then we've got some money going to utilities, debt service, which was brought up. That's a very good comment, is a portion of our budget. But anyhow, I just want to say you're either above it or you're below it. And the gap is just enormous, that living on the same dollars as last year is just not realistic for a district that's grown over 200 kids. So, next, let's go down to, here we go. Budget hearing. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on this one. Talk about some of the different facets that goes into the budget, and then it will be open for public comment once again. I talk, and we've gone over these before. You've seen this slide. Number one, we have been operating on thin cash balances for several years. This isn't anything new. You can go back and listen on YouTube. Previous budget hearings, we've just operated very thin. So, you know, one way to save the mill levy is to cut into cash balances, but we're already, in my opinion, dangerously thin. We were devastated by block grant funding a few years back, and it is hard to recover when you've been penalized millions of dollars by the state. They froze our funding for 3 years. And again, in a rapidly growing district, you cannot live on, we dove into cash balances to survive, and it's been hard to recover. The other thing is, when you're rapidly growing, you're building new buildings. We've got several that are less than 5 years old. They're terribly inefficient, period. There's nothing I can do about that. To make them efficient, you would need to fill them up with kids immediately. And then if you're doing that, then you're turning around building more when you keep growing. So you have to deal with the inefficiency because you're still paying the heating and the cooling costs on those facilities, even though they may only be at 60 or 70% capacity. It is important to note, we have lowered the mill levy 16 of the last 18 years. And I know we've talked about dollars, but I do focus on the mill levy, which is what we're voting on tonight. It does take 20 years to pay off a bond issue, and I'll go into that a little more detail. And ESSER funding, whether you agree, disagree, we were at the low end by far on the ESSER funding, which cost us, we could have saved a lot more money in places had we been reasonably funded. You know, the budgets over the years, as I shared with you, I tried to keep that mill levy flat or declining. So we don't have years where I give you we give the voters a 5 mil decrease, only to turn around and have to come back the next year and increase it 3 or 4 mils or 5 mils. I try to look long-term, what we need to do for long-term survival. And again, I mentioned salaries and benefits. That's 70% of our budget is people. And the board has made it very clear. We want to attract and retain high quality staff. And so we did give raises this year. And we were trying to catch some of the districts that pay $10,000 more for equal experience. And we went through hours and hours of salary schedules of the neighboring districts and the ones that we lose teachers to. And so we did do a lot on the salary schedule this year to try to retain staff. And the last bullet point, if we're going to reduce class sizes, or try to keep smaller class sizes, it costs more. So, next slide. This just shows us we've made, and I told you, we are very thin on cash balances. We've made just slight progress the last 2 years, but we're nowhere near what the state would recommend we be at. You're looking at 2.7 in the blue, 2.7 million with total expenditures at 58. So it's a very small percent. I mentioned ESSER. I spoke more in detail. This is going to be the last time I talk about ESSER. It's very frustrating to know that had we got just the national average, $9 million more, we would be we'd be revenue neutral tonight with 9 million. But we didn't get it. We were at the low end. And so it is what it is. Increasing enrollment, you see, I budgeted for a little over 200 increase from the 3874 from last year, to 4085.4 this year. Growth, here it is. If you look at everybody in Johnson County, you'll see in 1920, we were growing at 5%. The next year, COVID really messed things up. We were down to 2.2. We turned around, rebounded. We were at 8 the next year, 2.3, and then 5.1 last year. And this is FTE. This isn't bodies of kids. It's full-time equivalency. It's what generates our budget dollars. But you'll see, you average that out, that's almost 5% per year over the last four years. Whereas everybody else is pretty much flat. Assessed valuation, you can see we have made significant grounds in assessed valuation. That is not something we control. If you're not happy with the value of your home or property, you need to go to the appraiser and protest it. They're the ones that control the values of property. State aid, this is big, because when we talk about debt and repayment of debt, state aid is an area that has decreased significantly for us, especially on our newer bond issues. When we issued the last bonds in 2018, state aid was at 30% when we issued those bonds. Today it's zero, nothing. And so when we have to plan out those future debt payments, one day we were counting on 30%, now it's down to nothing. And any bond issue we pass at this point forward is going to have no state aid. It's going to be entirely local tax dollars. That's huge. And that's an argument we need to have with the state. It really is. And I talk about that in a future slide. It's not right that our older debt is being we're getting 45% state aid. So every outstanding dollar that we're having to pay in principal and interest, the state's given us 45 cents on the dollar. Everything after 2015 is at zero. Mill levy history. And you can see way back when the mill levy jumped all over the place. I started here in July of 2003. We did pass a bond issue, a huge bond issue when we built the high school just to the west of us. It jumped the mill levy 14.5 mils. I mean, that's insane to think about. We would have probably 500 people here tonight if we were raising the mill levy 14.5 mils. We wouldn't be meeting here. We'd be meeting in the high school auditorium. But we did it back then. And as soon as we did it, we immediately took to trying to get that mill levy decreased. And we did it for several years. We did, with the last bond issue in 2018, we did increase it 4.5 mils, but we've already started decreasing it since. So the mill levy is what we can control, and there's different funds that make that up, which I'll show you here in just a second. Here is the breakdown. 20 mills is set by state statute. We can't go higher or lower. Supplemental general, you'll see it did go up this year to 10 mills. That's in part because, and we've talked about this current year funding. Capital outlay, we've left it right at 8 mills for the last several years. Debt, bond and interest, our principal, yes, that is going up 1.2 mills. If the state, would give us more state aid, we would be happy to decrease that. And, unfortunately, they're not. Special assessment, we have decreased that because we are sitting on a sufficient, what I would consider sufficient cash balance there. Extraordinary growth, we've been declining that as well. And then cost of living is something we qualify. It did go up a little bit, but it's extraordinary growth and cost of living. Those two are kind of interchangeable. You'll see that together those have gone down. You add it all up and you're looking at about $0.25 decrease from last year from all the funds combined. How do we compare with our neighbors in Johnson County? You will see back in 06, 07, we were fourth highest. And then for several years there in the middle, you'll see that we were the second lowest in Johnson County. And then when we passed our bond issue in 2018, it did cause us to raise the mill levy. And then since then, you can see it's pretty much been flat, slight decline, but pretty much flat. Here is a breakdown of all the school districts in Johnson County. And you will see we've been in the 60s for that 10-year period. There were some districts in the 70s. And again, I've tried to keep the mill levy as flat, if not declining as much as possible. Legislative targets. Last year when we were having our budget hearing, I said, hopefully we can get current year funding. We got that. That was huge, but that is also driving the amount of dollars up that we have available to spend this year, which we said we're going to give back to our teachers to make our salaries more competitive. State aid calculations, I already talked about that. Pre-2015 is at 45%, post is at 0. Had we been at the same level, you can see that would be another 6.65 mills. And when we talked about revenue neutral, we're about 6.7 mills off. If we would have equal debt payments across the board from the state, we could be revenue neutral this year, but it is what it is. And then I've also shared with you the lack of new facilities waiting, which was part of the formula for many, many years. And then they took it away with block grant funding in 2015. Just what we would have got this year, we could have lowered the mill levy by at least 1 mill. New facility waiting, and I went into more detail last time, but I'll bring it up again. You can see all these years from 06 to 2015, we received 2.7 million in state aid because of this waiting. Then they took it away from us. And here's all the buildings we opened and the kids that came in from 2018 to the current. You'll see we missed out on almost $3.4 million. Again, we have to play with the cards that were dealt, but 3.4 million on top of what we have today, we could have lowered the mill levy by at least 5 mills. But we have to play with what the legislators fund us. I do want to mention, because in the near horizon, we're going to consider when we might go out for another bond issue, because we're still growing and we're going to hit capacity at some of our facilities in the near future. Every promise we made when we've gone before the voters and said, here's how much money we need, here's what's going to happen with the mill levy, we're 4-0 since 2003. And I think that's very important to mention. Final thoughts. We do look, when interest rates are dropping, we have looked to refinance. We've saved a little over 10 million by restructuring our debt over the years, which again is able to give the voters some mill levy relief when we're able to do that. So that's my part to share with the public and with the board. And so now it's time to let the public speak.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate all the information you've given us over the last few weeks to help us through this. We will open the public comment portion of this hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak to the Board of Education in regards to the budget?
I had a couple questions on your slide that you showed. You're comparing us to other schools in the mill levy that we're the highest. Based upon Gardner, Blue Valley, the other ones around us, we are the highest.
Yes.
How is it that they were able to get their mill levy down and we have problems with ours?
If you go back historically, some of those districts were the highest when they were rapidly growing. Like Gardner, DeSoto, they had years where their mill levy was in the 80s. And it was because they were building new buildings, trying to keep up with their growth. When you're growing, there's just a lot of cost involved. Now that they're not growing as fast as they were, they're paying down their debt. They're not issuing new debt. It's a lot easier to manage. So they were in the same boat we were in, but it was 10, 15 years ago. It's just where we're at today.
And do we have any new schools going on now?
Any what now?
New schools being built now?
No, we're done with construction. The 2018 bond issue, all those funds have been spent. The last project we completed was for Spring Middle School, not too far from here. But the board will be, there will be meetings coming up as far as how soon do we need to look at building again? Because it will happen. We're reaching capacity at some of our facilities.
Well, that's where I'm at a loss a little bit, because you were speaking about the facilities that we have now that are light of students, but yet some of them are full, according to what you say. So where are we light and where are we heavy?
Yeah, middle school, we're light because we just opened Forest Spring Middle School. When we opened it, it's nowhere near capacity. So we got room to grow there. We got room to grow at all of our middle schools. It's the elementary level that we're running into some capacity challenges. And even our high school, we're over 1,100 kids this year, and we're struggling on space at the high school. So there's going to have to be some decisions made there.
So you said that there was a shortage that we lost money to the state on. Can you explain where we lost funding from the state and how that happened?
Yeah, the state aid on the debt, the bond issues, legislators can do whatever they want, and they made a change in 2015 to the formula. And the changes they made, I'd have to go back and pull the statutes. Initially, we were given, where we fell was 30% state aid. And so we had a year where on that newer debt, we were getting 30% state aid. And then as the years moved and things change, our percentages continue to drop based on our population of kids and based on our valuation of our district.
So now we're at zero.
On debt after 2015, yes.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the board regarding the budget?
One short comment. And I believe your data, Doug, says that as of last year, you started getting zero bond assistance.
On the newer debt.
And I assume that last year you raised the bond mill levy to make up for that zero. Again, you're getting zero. So my assumption would have been you made up what the state didn't give you last year. So why are you increasing it this year?
it would take me probably an hour to explain our debt schedule, but it is not something you just do one year. You look, it's a 20-year repayment for our debt. So, as I build the budget, I start off by, how much operating cash are we going to need? And the biggest expense is people. So I look, okay, how much of a raise are we hoping to give our staff? How many people are we going to hire? And that's where the new money really gets divvied up. But we also have to anticipate, what's inflation going to do and build in some cushion there in case utilities take a significant increase. But as far as the debt schedule, we kind of knew 5, 10 years ago, here's our repayment. That's nothing new. And we know what that mill levy might take. And as I build it, I look at the total. I don't look at just bond and interest and say, oh, here's what we need to do there. If bond and interest needs to go up, you'll see I usually lower something else down so that the overall mill levy is staying flat or going down. That's the target. I play with the pieces so that overall I can come to you and say, we're going to lower the mill levy as a whole. But it is true because of the lack of the state aid, because our payments are getting bigger as we pay off that debt. That's the way it was structured. I have in my budget book, pages, it's toward the end. I don't have them memorized yet. 206, 207, 208, and 209. You will see that we still have 207,350,000 in principal outstanding, along with another 61.3 million in interest for a grand total of 268.7 million. That's a lot of money. It's percentage wise, it's the highest in the state. It's because we're a rapidly growing district and we've had to build new facilities to keep up with the growth. The good news is we're paying off about 15 million a year now. And so as long as we don't issue any more debt, chopping off 15 million a year, it's going to get whittled down somewhat quickly, but it's going to take time. It is going to take time.
All right, thank you, Doug. Any other questions regarding or comments regarding the budget?
I am going to throw, there is hope for the future. We have some pretty nice size projects that are coming to Spring Hill. There's the Walmart facility, which is in our district up the road on 169 highway. There's another development across it. As this district gains more commercial assessed valuation, that's going to help us drive down the mill levy in the future. It really is. There's hope. But right now, Spring Hill is very dependent on our residential properties for our tax base, which is unlike all of our neighbors to the north, where their commercial's a bigger portion of their tax base. It's just very unfortunate that we are so dependent on residential homes to support it. But hope is coming. There's more commercial coming this way. Hopefully the new Webster Street, that they'll start building new buildings, commercial, industrial, up and down that road. And when that happens, just like it happened in DeSoto and Gardner, the mill levy will come down. It will. It's just, that's not where we're at today.
Okay. Any other comments to the Board of Education regarding the budget? Dr. Luttrell, have you received any correspondence related to the budget?
I do not, but I did want to add that any of the, I did speak with the individuals beforehand, and I definitely understand, their questions, and I want to make sure that each of them know that if you want to reach back out or leave your number, I will definitely reach back out to you and set up a time to come in and answer any and all questions that you have and tell you not only, where we're at now, but where we've been and where we expect to be over the next 3 to 5 years, because we do want our patrons to understand, where we're at. And like I said, it's not something that we take lightly with our budget. we are fortunate that we are in a growing mode with, as a growing community, but with that growth, also, comes some pains that we have, to spend and allocate funds for that. But again, anyone that ever wants to ask questions about the budget or speak about our growth and our future plans, please do not hesitate to reach out to this office, and I will definitely make time to make sure that we meet and answer any all questions you have.
Thank you. And thank you to you for coming out. It's not always easy to get up and speak along with not have all the answers. But I encourage each of you to always come, email, speak to us, speak to our staff, get your questions answered. All right, if there's no further comments, oh, yes, sir.
One last one. I will address this to all of you concerning, you said 70% of the budget goes to salaries, correct? So that's locked in, nothing we can do about that. How about the other 30%? Has anybody taken a hard look at the other 30% that you can do something about? And are you willing to look at that 30% to see where cuts may come from? Because as a taxpayer, I'm getting fed up each and every year of my taxes being raised. Now, my wage doesn't go up as much. Inflation's been hitting us, and a lot of people have to make cuts. And I'm going to be of the age to where I'm going to have a fixed income. You know what a fixed income is? It's like that flat rate that you are imposed upon here to where you have to sit there and live within your means. So I ask you guys to take a hard look at your 30%, that maybe something could be done to take the burden off these people here today. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's no other comments, we will close the budget hearing. And we will take a 5-minute recess and begin our meeting at 6:07. to the Board of Education meeting for September 9th. Rachel, please take the roll. Mrs. Horn? Here. Mr. Chitwood?
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell? Here. Mr. Ewing? Mrs. Milius? Here. Mr. Hull?
Here.
Mrs. Baker? Here. We have a quorum. Thank you. All right, moving on to approval of the agenda.
Madam President, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. Oh. Motion and 2 seconds. Any discussion? All right, Rachel, take the vote, please. Mr. Chitwood?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell? Yes. Mr. Ewing? Mrs. Milius? Yes. Mr. Hull?
Yes.
Mrs. Baker? Yes. Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Approved. Thank you. All right, will you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance. All right, thank you very much. We read the mission and vision each meeting to kind of steer us and remind us what we're here for. So our mission is to be a school district that engages students to learn, create, adapt, and succeed in an ever-changing world. And our vision is to maintain small town values and empower each student to achieve world-class success. All right, moving on to business with individuals. No cards were presented. Wonderful. Thank you, Rachel. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes the approval of the consent agenda items, approval of the minutes, personnel, Zello work-based learning module, proposed policy GAOE, approval of the 2024-2025 crisis management plan, renewal of teacher subscriptions to Deep Space Sparkle, and renewal of Read Naturally Live grades K through 5.
Madam President, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented and read.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, Rachel, please take the vote. Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mrs. Milius? Yes. Mr. Hull?
Yes.
Mrs. Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood?
Yes.
Approved. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, moving on. Good news, recognitions, and announcements. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, we have 2 items that I want to highlight here this evening, and we're going to do a video here at the end of one of our What's Going Well here the first around 19 days of school. But first, the big news is we kind of teased last meeting about that we heard rumors that our Spring Hill Education Foundation was interested in possibly making a donation to the school district to help us enhance some of our programs, especially in the areas of science, technology, engineering, and math, also by the acronym of STEM. We've done a lot of work in that area the past few years. The high school implemented Project Lead the Way. Several years back, we have some robotics teams with STEM in our elementary school. And while we have some STEM classes basic at our middle schools, I think that there'd been some discussions with our teaching and learning person, Dr. Smith, who can be very persuasive. And she visited with the foundation along with our middle school principals and leadership. And they arranged, at the end of the day, felt that would be a great investment. So here this evening is we have some representatives from our Education Foundation Board of Directors led by their Executive Director, BJ Harris. And they want to, at this point, make a $50,000 donation to help fund Project Lead the Way. And so they're going to come and talk about that.
Yeah, come on up here and let's do this thing here pretty quick. But yeah, thank you very much, BJ Harris. We do have members of the Spring Hill Education Foundation Board here. Our board president, Grant Ewing, as well as April Earhart, our board secretary, Brittany Stewart, our newest member to the board, and Dave Dunmeyer, our most experienced member of the board, is what we'll say there. And then Dr. Smith, and you're right, very persuasive. And when we started talking about the chef has been looking for an opportunity to really make a big splash and really make a big impact. We've kind of been known over the years as an organization that's really good about helping in the classroom, and we're getting ready to go tomorrow to visit some of the classrooms we've helped with teacher grants last year and kind of see how those projects are going. But beyond that, we were really excited to do something that was a little more involved, a little more going to move the needle for these kids. And ultimately, the story that was told that got me gung-ho about it, which allowed me to get them gung-ho about it, was the presentation the elementary schools did for you guys about and for them about not having that maturation of STEM curriculum from the elementary school into the middle school. And how this project's going to work, I think, will allow that clear line and then allow that to then grow on top of it going into the high school, and we can really start to build upon this. And so the curriculum itself kind of speaks for itself, and I hope this contribution is going to help get things jump started. So I'd love for her to share a little bit about it.
So I appreciate knowing I'm really persuasive, but I am actually going to give credit to our elementary school students who last year came to the teaching and learning department and several other district level administrators and asked if we could expand opportunities for robotics at the middle school. Several of our elementary schools have started clubs organically out of student interest. And while we do offer several STEM courses at the middle school, there's not an emphasis in robotics. So that is something that our kids have asked for. It's a desire. They want to get more learning in the area of robotics. They want to compete. And then when they go into high school, they want to have that knowledge so that they can really have a good competitive edge when they're participating in our high school courses. So with that, how can you say no to pursuing the interests of your elementary students? So I really appreciate the Spring Hill Education Foundation giving us an opportunity to share what our students desire and then helping fulfill those desires. So I'm really excited to see our middle school students just take off with robotics. So thank you very much for letting us propose this and bringing these exciting programs to our kids.
I would just finally, before we do it, we were able to do this because of contributions from our community. We're in the middle of our Chef Timber campaign, which is our biggest fundraiser of the year, and how we are able to do these projects. And so all those businesses that I'm sure sitting at home watching this live feed, be sure to support our Chef Timber campaign, as well as our staff. They've already really kicked in a lot with our employee contribution campaign. Just got a $100 check from Mr. Hull there for his contribution, so I appreciate that. He'll get a t-shirt for that contribution. And we're going to be able to take some of those teacher funds and continue to push those back into classroom as well. For the time being, this will be our big contribution for classrooms for the year. And then we're really going to build on this year for our Chef Timber campaign and look towards the future for other things that we can do to continue to impact it and meet the mission of Spring Hill Schools. So I'll let you talk if you want to talk. No, good. All right, well, very good. Let's do a picture. One of them. Let's get on. Sure.
Yeah, make it look like the sun's kind of
Shiny enough.
I was gonna say, do you have to take that to the big check?
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Chef. Thank you very much. I cannot wait to see what our middle schoolers do with that. Very exciting, very, very exciting. Okay, Dr. Luttrell, is there?
And then we have a brief video. Now, if you remember, the last couple of years, we've taken our video time on what's going on and kind of targeted one specific school each month, and us continue to grow. That doesn't always highlight everything we need to. So this particular what's going well is going to kind of just have a hodgepodge of happenings that have occurred across the district since the onset of our school year. So at this time, this is what's going well across the district. That's our good news recognitions and announcements.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Luttrell. All right, if we move on, discussion items, 10.01, presentation of implementation of a therapy dog program at Woodland Spring Middle School.
Yes, our board policy does allow for a professional therapy dog to be utilized, in the endeavor. We've never utilized that yet or implemented it. We do have one of our buildings that, has had a desire and is going to be implementing that in the near future. But before we did, we know anytime you do something, there's going to be questions. So I just thought it would be good before we formally embark on this new endeavor, which I think is really going to be a very, very strong positive for not only the school and the students, but potentially could even be expanded in future years. And so this evening, we have to kind of tell you a little bit about how the therapy dog program is going to work and how it became about. We have our Woodland Spring Middle School principal, Mr. Paul Carter, and then as well as the dedicated counselor that is gone through all the many hurdles that it takes to get the credentials to have a true therapy dog. So, Mr. Carter, enlighten us, please.
Well, one, thank you for having us. We're very excited to kind of present in June here. And this is a great opportunity that I'm excited to have in our building. I think it'll be very useful for a lot of our students throughout the day and throughout this school year. But Amy Walls is with us. Amy Walls is actually the owner and the dog handler for this. And so I'm going to let her kind of talk about June, those types of things. If you have a question specifically about the dog, she can help answer that. And then if you have any questions afterwards, you can ask us or ask me any questions about how we're going to actually implement that there at Woodland Spring.
Yeah, so this is June. She's a 1-year-old mini golden doodle. And I obtained her through Sunflower Doodles. It's a Spring Hill local breeder. And I've just been doing a lot of research on therapy dogs, really wanted to bring that into the school. There's a ton of research to just provide what dogs can do for kids and anxiety and just stress, opening up to a dog versus a person. And so I started looking into it, doing a lot of research, going to other school districts and talking to other counselors and other employees. And obtained her and then went through all the training and here we are. So she's a little skittish tonight, but normally she's really great. She loves kids, probably more than adults. And she's been to a mental health hospital a couple times to be a therapy dog there. She's had quite a bit of exposure. And like I said, she's been through the AKC Canine Good Citizen Test, which is what is required of therapy dogs. So she's passed all the requirements, done all the things, and is a really good girl.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Is there a further presentation or do you open for questions?
So any questions that you may have about the dog program, attached is kind of how a kind of general overview, and those attachments are kind of some general overview of how we will be using June in our school, and some different options going through a couple of there's 2 different board policies that do apply to having an animal on property. So we kind of went through those to kind of look through and follow those rules that you guys have there for. We have not obviously sent anything home to parents yet at this time because we wanted to make sure that you guys heard about it first.
Thank you.
I did just have a couple of questions. I was reading through this and I kind of was thinking of the other board members, and there probably wasn't anybody else up here when we actually went through this as a board, I think back in 2016, maybe. Because we did have some programs in Spring Hill Elementary and Wolf Creek 2 different times. So one of my questions just from the board perspective is liability and like insurance, like what kinds of, how does that look?
Yeah, and so the board policies kind of lay that out. Obviously, for any property damage or things like that there at the school, it does actually go towards the dog handler is the one that is responsible for those.
What about like a personal, something, a personal injury? Thank you,
Yeah,
Mr.
so I've
Tillman.
actually checked with my life and my insurance, and they would cover any kind of personal injury.
Okay,
So it has to be carried by myself.
okay.
So when it comes to insurance, it is by the dog handler.
Okay. And that was probably my biggest question, because I think the person that did some things before, they said their policy, like there was some stipulations, you had to always have them on a leash, and it was like a $2 million policy or something. So just, yeah, I want to just make sure that that's.
And she'll always be on a leash. That's never going to be an option for her not to be. That's part of the requirements of her as a therapy dog, is that she's leashed at all times. She's cute.
Yeah.
And I chose a mini golden doodle because they're hypoallergenic. So I actually am allergic to dogs myself. So I needed a dog that was hypoallergenic, and she is. So yeah.
Yeah, on the insurance, and this is one I don't think either of you'll be able to answer. Somebody might do the research. So on the insurance side, were we a named insured? Or can we find out if that was a requirement, whether we were named insured? Basically what it means is specifically your insurance policy is saying USD230 is covered just like you're covered. There's some stuff behind it, and I don't expect either of you know that, but if we can figure that out, that would be great. From a therapy dog standpoint, my 2 Spring Hill kids have graduated and they're at a university now, and the university police officer actually walks around with a doodle who is more popular than anybody on the campus. So there's absolutely value in there, and I see that. So that's all I wanted to add.
She looks like a really sweet dog. I got to pet her. I'm sure the kids will be excited. What's kind of your plan for implementing, and when are you going to have her start coming, and what's your plan for notifying parents?
So our plan for that, the board policy kind of lays that out to where first we need to educate our students how to act around a therapy dog. So we'll be doing that most likely during our lunch period. The different lunches, Amy will kind of be presenting on how they should act around the dog, how they should behave around the dog, and things like that, and also how to sign up, because June will kind of be joining us right now is 1 day a week, most likely Fridays, but obviously that can be flexible, or anytime that's needed. Amy could always run home and bring her back if we do have a situation to where it would be helpful for a student. And then our plan is once presented to you guys, and you guys had obviously heard about it, then we'd start our communication home as well to parents. Because another option, another stipulation that the board policy said was to let parents opt out if they do not want to interact. So a Google form has already been created that parents would be able to fill out. Communication will go out specifically in a special email all about it, and then as well as in my weekly newsletter that I send out on Sunday evenings, to where parents could opt out if they did not want their student to have any interaction with the dog.
I'm super partial to anything named after a month, so good call there. That was great. So I just wanted to say, you had me there. So-
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so you're referring to two board policies. Can you tell us what policies?
So I would have to go back and look at my emails to Dr. Robinson. I'm unsure which ones they were.
ING is animals and plants in schools. And INGA is the one that's specific to service and therapy animals.
Thank you. And what is gonna be your approach if there's students that maybe have an extreme fear or something like that? Will they be able to have alternatives, or will there be space for?
Yeah, so June will actually be housed in Amy's office. There'll be a kennel in there where she'll be housed. And she will never go into any classrooms. That was one stipulation that I had too, because we don't want to disrupt any of the learning environment. Because no matter how good June is, the dog walks into my class, I'm going to pay attention to the dog and not my teacher. We all know that's true. So students would be able to sign up to have meetings with Amy if they wanted that, if they knew the dog was there that day, or Amy could call parents, hey, I do have my dog here. It might be good for your student to come and talk at that time. And then June will also be joining us at lunch. So she's kind of off to the side. Johnson County Sheriff's Office has also brought in their dogs before, and that's kind of how it's handled, is off to the side. So students can approach us. Instead of the dog approaching them, the students approach us, and same in the hallways, to where students, if they're like, yeah, I don't want to deal with the dog, or I'm afraid of a dog, they're more than welcome to walk they'll never be stuck in a spot where they have to interact with the dog.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you. I have one last question, and it's about the opt-out. And I think I'd asked you, we were gonna look up statute, not this young man, about statute. I know that there's an opt-in, opt-out situation. Did we find out if it is an opt-out situation?
Statute doesn't clarify either way.
Okay.
So our plan would be opt out because of that, just because the response from parents is normally, we get more of a response if they want to opt out, based off of if we're having to make everybody opt in, it's just harder to keep track of it that way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much. Any other thoughts or?
Yeah,
questions?
I'm just curious. So it's a discussion item tonight. Is this requiring a board vote?
This was just
Forward?
information.
That's what I
Just
thought, because
information.
we've already got it covered in policy, right? So the one thing I would ask then, Paul, is I know you've got a pretty robust media group at the school. It'd be really nice if we could get maybe a video update after the semester as to how it's gone during the fall semester.
I'll put my broadcasting kids right on.
There you go. Okay.
They're always looking for topics anyway. So
Sounds good.
I'll give that over to them.
And I will tell you, the breeder has already reached out to me, and if this is successful and everything goes accordingly, she would love to work with the school district on putting other dogs in other schools to help as well. So that is something that she would like to.
Yeah, and that was going to be kind of one of my comments, which is one of the things, since it's not coming back, I'd kind of like to, at some point, understand best practices and the actual implementation, because you're finding your way, June's finding June's way, students are finding their way, we're all finding our way, and that's okay. But where does that end up? Where is it most positive? Where is it most impactful? I'd like to see that back. I don't speak for the board, I speak for myself, but I think we might want to know that at some point. I do speak a lot. You're right. Guilty as charged. I try.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I would like to know if it's just used on those Fridays or if there's additional days that you need to go get her and bring her in, or, if something happens, if there's instances where you seem to, come and get her and bring her to the school, or if it's strictly just the Fridays. So.
I will tell you that there's sometimes days where I end up with a lot of crying kids in my office. And that's a great example of, if she wasn't there on that particular day, that she would have been a great tool. Just because they were very emotional and didn't necessarily vocalize or could vocalize. And so having her to just kind of be a comfort was something that, would have been really helpful. So, yeah.
Yeah. And to piggyback on all that, knowing when you've used them, and if it's something that you think that you can expand June to the other middle schools, or what capacity, like Thursdays she's at at Forest and Wednesdays she's at,
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, the only problem we would have with that is the dog, according to board policy, has to be with its handler, which means Woodland Spring would be without a counselor because she'd be the one that would be taken to the other school, which is why she'd be specifically used at Woodland only.
Sure.
April, are you gonna go ahead and propose that all therapy dogs are named after moms?
August, September.
Okay.
I saw a theme.
I will tell you, we actually thought about another one and naming her May. So there you go.
But not April. No therapy dog can be named April.
That too.
I am honored to have a dog named after me, so.
My husband's a mental health therapist, and so she's gone with him and been a great asset at his hospital. So that's where we were talking about getting one for him, and we could just name it April.
I love it. Well, wonderful. Well, any other thoughts, comments? Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you. All right, moving on. 10.02 Technology Department update on summer projects.
Couple meetings ago, we had Kylie, Mr. Delphia talk about an update, just some of the things, many things that they did across the campuses during the summer with projects that were routine as well as some that, that they'd asked for. Well, also a lot is always going on with our technology department that's just routine or something that's enhancing, what they're doing. And so the technology department, Mr. Elliott, as well as, the director-elect are here, and they're just going to give us a brief update on some of the many things that they are continually doing to make sure that our technology across the district stays very robust. So, Mr. Elliott.
So I won't take very much time. Obviously, you guys can read. I just wanted to throw some things out there. We did about $1 million Cisco upgrade, which was partially funded by the E-rate process, as you may remember. But it was 460 wireless access points that's crawling up in the ceiling and replacing those. 79 network switches, that takes full sections of the building down as we do that replacement, as well as the core switch. Billy, Nick Stiles, our network engineer, and I came in on a Friday and worked our way through that process. One of the other things, we had some great summer help. I had a couple college students, and then I had a teacher that was able to work part-time, and they really managed the wireless. Nick did a great job getting those prepped ahead of time, but they did all of those replacements, and they did the Apple TVs, which is on the next slide, at the same time while they were in those rooms. New internet service provider. That's always scary. There's a lot connected to the ISP and all the routings and everything that goes with that. But that was part of the E-rate bid also, as you may recall. I wish I'd have been able to stand up and say we were cutting fat. There's $16,700 a year that we are doing everything we can to try to keep the budgets as thin as possible. Because we turned over Hilltop, when we originally put our fiber in to try to stay out of the 175th and Merlin intersection, we ran the fiber behind Hilltop for our connections up to Prairie Creek, Timber Sage, and Woodland Spring. So before we could do that turnover, we had to move that back out into the utility right away. So that was another project that we did over the summer. Server and storage updates. Our primary storage area network, which was basically all our virtual servers, was replaced. Our disaster recovery server, which is basically takes mere copies of all of our active servers. And then some security and system updates, that just standard stuff that we do periodically throughout the year. This next section I include because it's just kind of something to be aware of. It takes a lot of time. Billy specifically spends a significant portion of his summer, or has in previous summers, spent a significant amount of his summer working on these things. It's basically closing out the year, opening up the new year, all the pieces that go with that. And it's everything from copying the class schedules over to things like grading which grade sets are available for which courses, and all those all the calendars and all those kinds of things, just lots and lots of details. He's got pages and pages of checklists. He works his way through on that. I mentioned the Apple TVs earlier. We had some 10 to 12-year-old models that just couldn't take updates anymore. And there were some features that were preventing the teachers from being able to do video effectively in the classroom. So we updated about 200 classrooms worth of those. Secondary student iPad maintenance. So we took back all the secondary students' devices. We went through them all, replaced a few cases that were damaged here and there. They did a really nice job of making sure that they had replaced their devices throughout the year, so we had very little that actually had to go in for repair. So that was kind of nice. Back in the MacBook days, that was not the case. We took out probably about 10% of them that they just didn't report. And but with the iPads, they've done a nicer job with that. I think the no cost accidental damage coverage probably helped with that a little bit. Update the operating system. Even though the students could do that themselves, a lot of them didn't. So there were several versions behind. So we wanted to get everybody at a starting point for this year. One of the nice things that's coming with that iPad is we'll actually be able to force those updates. We haven't been able to do that, and that's a new feature that's rolling out in the next version of the operating system. So when that comes out this fall, that'll give us some greater functionality and control so that hopefully we won't have to spend quite as much time in the summer working on those. And then just preparation, additional devices for growth. Elementary school carts, we did go through, as we talked about, piloting the second grade carts from Chromebooks to iPads. And that took a lot of rewiring. Again, the summer help was great help with that. The classroom counts is always a challenge. You know, the big day when everybody finds out what teacher they have. Well, it's just about the same time I figure out how many students are in which class. And so it's kind of a challenge to get all those ready. So it's first couple of weeks of school it's kind of we play a guessing game up until that point, and then we try to get them accurate. And then just general inspection and repair. Here's some of the other just New Year items I put on there. We have, how many pages is that document, do you think? The beginning of the year? 10? Oh, 18? 18 pages long of checklist of all the things we do at the beginning of every year. Here's just some of the high level ones just to kind of give you some ideas of some of those things. Those all have to be done. I did have one exciting stat, and this is the first time in a long time where we actually closed more than were opened on our service tickets in the month of August, because that's always a chaotic time for us, but we actually successfully closed more than were opened. And so that was a pretty big celebration for us. Some of the 2024, 2025 projects that are coming, the Chromebooks are at end of life. And so we need to evaluate that. And hopefully as the second grade project goes, we'll have a better feel at the beginning or end of this year, what that's going to look like. There are quite a few projects on district and building level to-do lists this year that are pretty tech heavy. So that's actually one of our bigger focuses this year will be to supporting some of the other departments in getting an acquisition and implementation of some of those projects. And just our standard routine maintenance. And then of course, the big item, at least the big item for me, is departmental leadership transition. Okay. And what Billy and I are working on right now is documentation, trying to make sure he's included in all the decision making, because I don't want to leave him anything that he doesn't want to deal with. He has become part of the administrative team activities. So he participates in the district leadership team and executive leadership team meetings and all the activities related. And then we're kind of working through, one of the things in a small department is a lot of times you assign duties based on people, maybe not positions. And you guys have all experienced that, I know, in your jobs. And so one of the things we're looking at is as I transition out, how do those duties get reassigned and what does that look like? You know, who takes on what roles and that kind of thing. So that's kind of the last two bullets there. Once we got the staffing and responsibility evaluation nailed down and we've got those areas covered, then we're going to transition the day-to-day management over. So any questions for either one of us? I didn't want to make Billy have to speak. He gets to do that from this point forward. So questions, comments?
Thank you. It sounds like quite a summer for you guys.
It was. We like I said, we had a lot of good help, so it was very fortunate.
I'll ask questions to make it feel good.
Sure.
All that outgoing hardware do we have to auction that?
We do
through E-rate, or
we have a disposal process. We typically use an auction service to do that. Some of the items we do trade in. So most of our Apple products, we use Synetic, which has been a partner for a long time. They do that trade in. They're also the ones that offer the purchase. So they use MacBooks. Okay. That same company does that. So anything that's got pretty significant value on a per device base, we typically use that process. Part of the reason we use that is they also deal with all of the data destruction and certify that so that we don't have to worry about a device leaving that had somebody's personal information on it or something like that. The rest of the items, servers, some of the switches, we will work on an auction process. We just recently, Purple Wave used to be our go-to source. They've decided that they're no longer going to do government disposal auctions. They want to focus on big money equipment and that kind of stuff, and not our little piles of junk that need to go away. So, but we do have another one in line. Kylie, what's the company? US Go. Thank you. So, and he's done a couple already with them, right? And so as we get all that summer stuff prepped and ready to go out, we'll be listing it on there.
And we'll be able to buy a cup of coffee with the proceeds.
You know, believe it or not, I always joke, and Doug knows what story I'm going to tell. Long story short, we had some copiers that were at the end of a lease years ago. It cost more to ship them than what the buyout was. And on the contract, we were responsible to pay shipping. So Doug and I got together and said, we'll buy them out. Right. And worst case scenario, it's still less than the shipping cost. We ended up selling those copiers, and I don't remember the numbers, Doug, but it was 4 or 5 times what we paid for the buyout, if not more than that. And it's amazing what people will pay. The other story is we sold some 36-inch CRT TVs at least 3 times before somebody actually picked them up. So they paid for them and everything else. I mean, they paid for them 2 times and just never came and picked them up. So we waited the amount of time and then relisted them. So that may be why Purple Wave decided they don't want to do auctions anymore. I don't know. But
Thank you.
thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions for Phil? All right, well, thank you guys. Thank you very much. All right, moving on, 10.03, recommendation of construction manager firm.
Yes, we, if you've heard that, we continue to grow for several years. We know we're going to have some areas and space-wise that need to be addressed, as long with some routine renovation needs across the district in the near future. We recently approved an architect, and as we about to embark on our community engagement meetings to kind of get the community to weigh in on what path they think is best. It's also, as we hear their ideas, they're going to need to get some pretty somewhat, 15,000 foot estimates on, what costs might be for those projects. And so we had interview firms recently after we put out an RFP. We narrowed that down to some of the top firms. And last week we took an entire day to interview those firms. In fact, we had your colleague, Mrs. Horn, took part in those interviews, gave up her time. Mr. Ewing was going to, but had a work conflict that emerged that didn't allow him to do so. But again, at the end of the day, we did have some consensus to make, some decisions to make, because like I said, they were all for the most part good, but there were some items that separated the others. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tim Meek, our Director of Construction and Safety, and he kind of give you an overview of the process and tell you who that recommendation is. And then we'll open it up for questions. And if you also will allow, if Mrs. Horn at that time wants to give some of her perspective as well, we can do that. So Mr. Meek.
All right. If any time during the deal you have a question, go ahead and stop me. If it's something that's not necessary for me, actually I have a couple of people here from Newkirk Novak with us as well that most of you recognize them. They've been here pretty regularly lately, hanging out with us, and great guys. So process we went through an RFP process and put that out a little over a month ago. Had 4 companies that contacted us with interest in it. 3 of them decided to go ahead and go through with the process, which are the 3 we have listed there: J.A. Dunn, Newkirk Novak, and Nabholz Construction. The 4th one said that they saw the list of who else was doing it, and since we had relationships with some of these other companies and used them before or not, or they saw that they probably wouldn't get selected, and I felt real good about our conversation. Not that they were mad or anything. They just said, we don't want to waste our time when we feel like we'd be number 4 of 4 probably. So went through that. They submitted their RFP. We went through the book. rated it. Based on that, all three of the companies were top-notch companies, and so we decided we wanted to interview all three of them. So on September 4th or 5th, the last Wednesday, we interviewed the three companies. I put their name in a hat, drew them out to see who got to go in what order, because everybody wants to go last. So, so did that. And our interview team at the end of the day had a list of about 10 questions we asked them after they'd given us a 30-minute overview of their company and how they would do business. And it was a consensus amongst us that to pursue with Newkirk Novak at the time. So, and that is going to be our formal recommendation to the board. At this point, we do have a draft contract that attached to board docs there. Again, it's a draft. It has not been blessed by Mr. Goheen. It has been sent to him, but that was just last Friday afternoon. It was sent to him. And so we're waiting on his comments back, which usually will happen here within about a week. So again, hoping for any questions or for me or for Lynn or Ben a couple of things, and I will tell you about the process. We have a great relationship with J.E. Dunn Construction, have had for quite a while. It was really probably the toughest thing for me to not choose them. But there was a couple of things that to me that stood out. Number one was the fee. J.E. Dunn was considerably higher on their fee. They were at, and it's part of the contract and stuff. They were at 2.6% fee, where Newkirk Novak was at 1.95. So considerable difference. Previously with J.E. Dunn, we were right at 2% fee. So, but other than that, the playing field was pretty even. I mean, everybody had the same capabilities and all. And so it kind of came down to when everything got pushed to shove was the money. So
So that might have been a good comment to make during the budget hearing.
yeah. So actually our fee will be a little less than it was with our previous construction manager. So, yeah.
Tim, you've been through this several times now. I don't know how many bond issues have you been through with a construction manager?
Well, as far as construction management, we've been through 4.
So is there anything that you're looking at doing different with this contract than we've done in the past, or is it, you think it's worked really well, how we've done things in the past, and you're going to keep it that way? Because it put a lot of involvement on you and Phil, right? So
Yeah.
is that going to be
But
similar?
I believe that involvement's what's made us so successful. The fact that we have somebody, and these guys can talk about that maybe as well. The fact that we have somebody that is at every progress meeting that's done, we know when there's something going wrong. We'll walk through the building and guys will tell us because they know us. They'll take us over and show us something that's not right. Not necessarily the construction manager, but because I know the electrician, he'll come over here and say, Tim, did you know they were going to run this way? I have an idea of a different way. He may have already told the construction manager that as well, but he just sees me and they know me. And the same thing is with Phil. When Phil was doing it as well, we would get people who would come and show us. And so we have a great understanding. And also with the architect being at those meetings, sometimes in those meetings, we could work through a process if there's something that needed to change. It may not be a true change order, but just something that needed to be moved or whatever. And we can work through those meetings being there. So really wouldn't change much of that at all. There are some differences in processes that these guys have. Nothing that's significant. As such, they don't have, and they may have a different, what I'm going to say, they don't have all of the MEP guy that's readily on their staff, but we also pay for that person if we're using a J.E. Dunn, we pay for that person's time as well that's on their staff. Plus, I think that's why their fee is higher, because they have that person sitting there. Normally, the architect, we go back to the architect and the engineer for those things anyway. This is a second set of eyes. If Newkirk Novak thinks we need a second set of eyes on it, they have some expertise in-house. They're not a mechanical engineer as such, I don't believe. But they have expertise in doing a lot of this. But if they think we need a second outside the architect and the installers, they have contacts of people to bring in to help us through a process. Because we don't always see eye to eye with the architect at some points. I mean, and the engineers, we get to a point not that it's bad, it's a good process. I mean, same thing that happens in your household. Sometimes you don't always see eye to eye with that person sitting across the table from you at home. But, sometimes when you talk it out, you get a better relationship and you also come to understand each other better.
So I captured 4 points from the day that I just wanted to bring up. So first, the thing that stuck out to me a lot about Newkirk and Novak was we had 3 owners in the room. And I don't know a ton about running a business, but what I do know is the owners care the most. And 2 of them have significant roles in our project, or will. And that was really powerful to me. They were there talking to us. They were readily available. And I loved that. The second note I wrote down is I just wrote Lauren. And anybody who knows Lauren on their staff is nodding their head. She's incredible. She talked a lot about helping with the community engagement. It's something she's done several times. She knows it really well, but she also kept hitting on the real world learning and bringing in students. She even shared a story about a student they brought on that worked with them a little bit through a project, and then they hired him as soon as he graduated, which anytime you can have a student feel such ownership and pride in a project like this, I think that's huge. And she mentioned it several times. Number 3, this one's for you. I did not understand the value of seeing the Newkirk and Novak guys in the room until we were going through the process, and they readily volunteered that they're E-verified. They knew that was important. And that's when I was like, oh, well, that's the benefit of sitting here for these days. So they are, so just so you know. But then the last, and ironically, I wrote down the safety and care. Their superintendents hit on it several times. They have helmet tags that if anybody in the community is like, hey, number 13 over there's not doing something right, all we have to do is say, hey, helmet number 13. They know exactly who that is. And that to me is super cool. But what was even cooler is this morning, ironically, I drove through the city of Eudora at a little before 8, and it was slower. There was traffic. There were parents. There was a bus. There were men on a roof. And I was like, oh, well, that's weird. Kept going, and there was a Newkirk and Novak sign. You guys had it so beautifully marked off. I could see where your construction crews were coming in and out. We were still flowing fine. And I thought, oh, well, that's another really powerful testament. Just dumb luck today. I was going to Lawrence. So I'm really excited to have you guys joining our team. I do really, really love this interview process. So I'm in. But I think you guys are going to be great partners, and I'm excited. And I know you guys and DLR are really going to set us up great for success. So.
Good job. No, and seriously, thanks for doing that. Thanks for taking the time out. And I do sincerely appreciate you, representing my interest, which I'll hit on again, which is, I do sincerely, this is more for the board than it is for you, which is, I want all of our contractors to run through E-Verify. I think it's the appropriate contracting process to go through in the work authorization space. But I want to pick up on something Mr. Meek said, which is really important to me, which is, in the really difficult construction environment that's out there now, those relationships are really key. It's going to be key to have that for the people who are going to do this right, and they're not tossing all the water bottles into holes and, filling up voids and doing those things that is fast and cheap. And having the relationship of walking out and go, no, this is for the kids, we've got to do it right, is hugely important to me. So thank you.
When you talked about relationships, one of the things that, you think, okay, you're going to a new construction company. Well, every one of the guys that are here, both the guys and even even Johnny Novak, when he's here, I've had the opportunity to work with them, plus several other people on their staff. So it's not like there's a big learning curve, because Ben was our project manager for the Spring Hill High School field, the football stadium and all back in 2016. Sorry, Ben. So in our 2016 bond, when we built that, Ben was the project manager. He went on to do some other things for the company he was working for, and then became a part of Newkirk Novak. Lynn was actually I don't know what your title was then, but project exec on that same project as well. John Novak was doing what John does now. Still, he's promoting his company with all that he has, and plus he cares very much about the clients. Lauren's doing phenomenal things that she always does. Scott was a project manager. That's one of their project managers now at Timber Sage. There's one more guy that I forgot, but I'm trying to think back in my mind that they're all familiar people to me. So it's not like we're starting a whole new team. It's already people we've worked with, and they understand Spring Hill and they understand how we do business overall. So, yeah.
And the only other thing I'll add is, I think every group really sang the praises of the staff that the district has involved. Tim and Phil, and the engagement that they have brought through the years has meant a lot to them. In fact, so much so that Phil got a great retirement gift. He got a picture of the IT server rooms that he's helped develop and refine. And so their involvement has been huge. So while I'm super excited to have Newkirk Novak and DLR, our internal team kept getting praised after comment after comment after comment. And so I think we can really be proud of that too.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited about this partnership. I think that although we aren't sure what our community is going to prioritize for solutions, I think this is, in my opinion, the right choice. So I'm very, very excited about it. Out of curiosity, who was the fourth company that decided to decline?
McCown Gordon.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. And again, because I'm curious, what was the pricing on Nabholz?
They were the same as Newkirk Novak. So
Oh, okay.
it was
Okay. Very cool.
Well,
All right. Well, any other thoughts or comments, guys? Questions? Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Hopefully we'll see you every meeting from now on.
Got anything you want to say? No.
We're just really excited to have this opportunity. So I got to work here a few years ago, and the relationships, this is a special place to me personally and to our company. So we're excited to get a chance to be a partner.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
And we'll bring back the contract as soon as Greg puts his stuff on it. We get a chance to run it back by them, because there's always a little bit on these contracts. There's always a little bit of back and forth where we say we want to do this and say, we really can't live with that. So there's always a little bit back and forth we'll have to deal with. But as soon as we get it all lined out, we'll get it back to the board for approval. So thank you, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, moving on, 11.01, revenue neutral rate resolution as an action item.
Okay. Again, Doug, anything last they need to do special and they just approved? Do they need to read the resolution or just?
I don't believe reading that's a requirement.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
I'm just double checking. Making sure I see it.
Madam President, I move to approve the resolution 25.07 revenue neutral rate as presented.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, Rachel, take the vote, please.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Hole,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
approved. Okay, thank you. 11.02 annual resolution to adopt local option budget percentage.
And this is also an annual statute that has to be adopted if you're going to exceed the LOB rate of 32%, which is you can do without a resolution. And we are going to be above that. And so again, there has to be a recommendation approved to our resolution approved to exceed that threshold of the 32%. Mr. Swin, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, this is somewhat redundant because we do have an LOB resolution that was passed back in 2017 that says we can go to 33% continuous and permanent. So I've battled back and forth. I was told the last couple of years, don't bother with it. But this past year, it was like, it's a vote. It's not a big deal. Just dot your i's, cross your t's, go ahead and have the board approve it. So here it is this year. You could make an argument, maybe we should have had it last year. But here it is. It's just confirming what's already in place for this year's budget.
Okay, so we're affirming what's in place with resolution 2508 of the existing 1805.
Yes, the board's already given us authority. Prior board has given us authority today to be at 33%. We're just reaffirming we're going to be at 33% this year.
Perfect. Then, Madam President, I move to approve resolution 25-8.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Rachel, please take the vote. Mr. Hull,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius. Yes, approved. Okay, moving on to 11.03, approval of the fiscal year 2025 budget.
And this is where the board is asked to take formal action on approving the fiscal year 25 budget as was presented earlier by Mr. Swin.
Madam President, I move to approve the fiscal year 2025 budget as presented.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, Rachel, please take the vote. Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius. Yes, Mr. Hull,
Yes.
approved. All right, wonderful. Thank you all very much. Moving on, future discussion items. All right, we have a few things on the list. There is one comment to this, which would be the student cell phone use. That is supposed to be presented at the
23rd. Yeah.
Yep, the 23rd, which is in the morning. And so, considering some of the publicity that has been given to other districts, there's been conversation that we move it to a televised meeting, the next televised meeting. Would anyone have?
I would agree with that. I feel like it should be televised for sure.
Thoughts, comments?
So what would what's the next meeting? What's the meeting we would move to?
It would be the October, I want to say 7th. Yeah. Meeting. That everyone's okay with?
Everybody's not, yeah.
Okay, so Rachel, will you please move that? And Dr. Cho, do you feel that's a doable move?
I would think so. It's, you know, we had been kind of planning on that 23rd date and moving to the evening. I think there's enough time that we may have to shuffle some of the people that may have been gonna take part of that, because with the evening and, you know, there's some may have activities that, but we can definitely probably change those individuals out, but there is still, that gives us still time. It's not like we're just changing it on a week's notice and moving it to an earlier time. So.
Perfect. Wonderful. All right. Anything? Oh, yes, go ahead, my dear.
Yeah, there is something I would like to add to the discussion list for future. So one thing that I think was discussed whenever we were approving the doctor was also having a ambulance at the varsity football games. So I know I have had some discussions with some parents in the district that are concerned about not having an ambulance on site. So I think that is a discussion that the board needs to have more in depth with administrators to see what other options there may be through Johnson County MedAct, or see what possibility they would have for being at our games, if any. But I don't want to drop this conversation. I feel like we need to keep talking about it and do some more research into what possibly can be done to have an ambulance. So I know Dr. Luttrell is going to do some research on that as well, but has anyone else had any comments from the public, or no?
No, I haven't, but I mean, it's just a change. And I mean, that I think what we're asking for is staff to go away and say, hey, can you figure out how to make that happen?
Yeah, just, talk to Johnson County MedAct and see what possibilities there are for having an ambulance sit there on site. I know there's been some discussion around their response times coming to the high school if there is an emergency. But I think that's too long. So having an ambulance on site during the games, I feel like is important, and I'd like to explore that more.
All right.
Yeah, it's not an action item yet on how to make it happen. Is it more a conversation on if there's number,
I don't think we voted to say we want to send it back to the staff to make it happen.
Right.
Ask what it would
Yeah,
take to,
but-
because
What I'm curious, I mean, Friday Night Lights is all over the state, right?
And all
I
over
mean,
the
there's,
community, the
and how many
metro
high schools
areas.
do we have right here in a 15-mile radius? I just don't know that it's possible.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to explore. I think it's a good conversation to have. I just don't want to send our staff out on a goose chase yet.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think adding it to this and making sure that we get it on a future meeting, so we can all have a
Right.
do some research before, have a clear discussion on it. I think that's great. We'll add it to the list. I want to make a comment on the public comment policy. Sharon sent us a little at a seminar conference. Rachel sent it. I'm sorry. Rachel sent it. Yes. And so, I don't know if anyone plans to go to that, but I do.
Yeah, I signed up for it too. I think, is it October 7th?
I have it down as October 1st.
October 1st, that's right.
Yeah, but so we probably, if there's a quorum of us, we need to know so she can notice it too.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
I signed up.
I signed up too.
That's okay.
Okay.
Could you notice it, please?
Did not.
Well, feel free. We'll notice it and it'll be.
If you guys could come back, I cannot that day. So if you guys could just come back and share.
I think that's a great plan, my dear. Since that's an option, I know that this was one of your topics. Do you think that would fulfill it? Do you want to wait until after?
Wait until after. I think once we go to that, we'll see the need to take some action.
Yeah.
So what you were talking about, because you put about the policy
Yep.
about kind of honing our policy a little bit. I mean,
Gotcha.
yeah, I think that's
Reviewing it.
worthy.
Yeah, I think once we go to the meeting,
Yeah.
kind of see
Yep.
where
Things have
some
changed.
opportunities are.
The
Absolutely.
climate has changed since some of these policies were written, and I think it would be a good idea to revisit.
In terms of adding to the future discussion, Mr. Schwinn's brought up some legislative items. And I appreciate that. I think having a legislative priority discussion so we can decide what our priorities are that we're going after and can provide some direction to staff would be a good thing. So I would propose that we put that on there. See a couple nodding heads, but okay.
Yep. I think that's great. And, as we move to calendar, could be an option for a board work session. Anything else? Anything else anyone wants to add? Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Moving on to the calendar. Board work calendar.
Okay, like I said, we do have quite a few items, coming up in the next few meetings. We're gonna have some updates on our in the strategic plan with our student success. We're also, like I said, we'll be bringing, to your next meeting for the action, formal action on the piece about the construction manager. We also have coming up in the near future, we've got some reports. I want to get back, where'd my thing go? I wanted to make sure that we gave get my thing back up here. Okay. We have, like I said, we have as you know, I've mentioned several times on some of my updates about we have our current license on our website vendor platform expires into next school year around June 30th. We've been currently in the process. Our communications department has been vetting some various platforms, and they're just going to come, I think, in a meeting on the 23rd and just get no action and just kind of tell you how that process is evolving, where they're at, and when they think they're going to be ready to come forward with a formal recommendation on what they want to pursue. They've been doing a lot of input gathering and information gathering from principals and directors. And I thought it was good that they would give you an update on that here in the near future. We also are planning on bringing to you, I think on the 23rd as well, there's been the conversation about how national competitions and that should be treated. And we've had some dialogue that we kind of want to share out to give you our thoughts as to how that we maybe think that, should be handled. We'll also have probably on the consent agenda or have on the recommendations as well. We do have at least one student group that's wanting to do an out-of-state trip, which they've gone about every year. And then, of course, it will give you later in October, we'll kind of give you an update. You saw the Education Foundation here earlier. They will actually, conjunction with the district, have our State of the District breakfast. I think it's on October 15th. And so we will be sending formal invites to, each of you and give you some more information on that in the days ahead. And then also at one of our future meetings in early October, as you know, we do, as I said before, we have had an uptick in the last few years with our ELL population. Actually, it's at least doubled. And so I think ELL, the mindset there, a lot of people, unless you're around it daily, really may not understand all the components that are in that program. And so I thought we were going to, again, have an update at one of our future meetings in early October about simply having some representatives from that program come and just tell you about what are some of the things they do with their students and how they make sure that students that do not have English as their first language, how we make sure that they settle in and have success while they are here with us. And then later in the fall, we'll get into starting, planning for next school year with, our course guides and enrollment guides and all that fun stuff. So a lot looming on the horizon.
Wonderful. In the annual board work calendar, it says in September, the Kansas Teacher of the Year banquet. I feel like they've moved that to November.
Wasn't it the day we came back from?
Oh, is it in the spring now? Okay. Would you?
Yeah. April.
Yep, you're right. I actually attended it, so
Back early.
that's right. This lady right here. Could you move that to on the annual board work calendar, Miss Rachel? Also, we do have a work session at the end of September. Dr. Luttrell, is there anything that you feel that warrants a work session, or do you think that legislative priority discussion is?
You could do that a couple different ways. I mean, we spent a lot of time on with finance over the last several months, and I think you as a board have a fairly good grasp on that. I think that, as again, we're about to kick off our community engagement meetings, which is in my superintendent's report, to decide how we're going to go down that path. I think it's still too early to maybe have a work session devoted to that particular topic. So you could do one of two things. I would recommend that either you maybe think, since several of you are going to be going on the 1st to that meeting at Gardner on open, you could, since it may have to be posted, you could just say we're going to go get information there. Again, even though all of you can't be there. Or if you want to, we could also, as you heard me say about Dr. Smith, you're going to be getting some information in the future about, again, our annual assessments and all the things we do to make sure that our students, have what they need in the classroom and how we use our data to guide instruction, through our PLCs. And so at some point in time, like I said, you may want to have a more extended time at a work session, with Dr. Smith to kind of come in and really talk in depth and answer questions about where we're at with our various assessments. But I think for the 30th coming up September, because we do also have 3 meetings in October, the 7th, the 21st, and the 28th. So I think if most of you or many of you are thinking about that meeting on the 1st, you could maybe forego that and call that kind of your work session, and then we'll move into October. But that's strictly up to you. I can definitely find a topic if you would like one.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I could go either way on it. If there's something we need to discuss, we could do both, but I'd be fine foregoing it too.
Anyone? Foregoing the work session on the 30th. Okay. So I say, I mean, if we're all in agreement, I say we forego it and we have October 1st, kind of in lieu of it.
Going there, right? So Rachel needs.
Yeah, she said she'd noticed it already.
Okay.
So, okay, wonderful. So we are removing September 30th from our meeting calendar. Awesome. Okay. Anything else related to the board work calendar? Okay. All right, moving on to Board of Education member reports. Does anyone have a report to share?
I can give a little report. Dr. Robinson and I attended and viewed PLC over at Dayton Creek Elementary. So Dr. Miller had them in the library all lined out and had the agenda in seriatim, and everybody was coming up with goals and talking and making things happy. And we got donuts. So we were pretty happy. We stayed out of the way. I stayed out of the way.
Did everybody get donuts or just Dr. Robinson?
No, I got one too. No, I think everybody got donuts in there. Yeah. No, it was good. It was good. They had a good time. Dr. Miller was running it and getting everybody going. So it was good stuff. It was really good to see.
So I just have a couple of things that are kind of for the good of the board sort of things, but on September 23rd, after our meeting at Spring Hill Middle School, I think at 10, I'm kind of organizing a meeting about the Spring Hill Alumni Association with the Spring Hill Education Foundation. They're kind of loosely run right now, and one of the people is in some pretty bad health. And so they're looking at maybe needing some help running that, and the Education Foundation is interested in helping with that. And so if any of you would like to be part of that discussion, April is going to be there and I'm going to be there. So probably no more than one more person, but that's going on. And then September 25th, this is during the day on, I don't know, Tuesday or Wednesday at 9 a.m. There's going to be a candidate forum between Adam Thomas and Stacy Knoll at the Olathe Chamber, which is in the new Olathe Library in downtown Olathe. September 25th at 9 a.m. And then on October 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m., location to be determined somewhere in Gardner. There's going to be the Kansas House 5, which is Carrie Barth, Henry Johns, and Johnson County Sheriff Doug Bedford by Byron Roberson forum. And that's put on by the Spring Hill and the Gardner Chambers together to represent those races. So if anybody has an interest in those.
Okay. I have a report. What am I saying? Dr. Luttrell, Doug and I attended the KASB legislative preview, I think they called it, kind of about what was coming up, lots of topics, special education. I'm trying to remember some of the main things. I think I dove into some topics that weren't their main topics. More like the opt-in, opt-out, things that maybe I wanted them to go a different route than what they were planning, but it was good discussion. I thought it was really, really great discussion. Quite a few school districts there. Lots.
Couple of state representatives.
Yeah. Not ours.
No, not
No.
ours.
not
Did
ours.
they say anything about the things with the funding that Doug has talked about?
The bond?
Yeah, the bond and interest in the new facilities waiting.
So no. Funny, there's not a lot of districts that, are.
Care.
Yes, so I did speak to a couple of them afterwards and kind of brought it up and they're like, but I did also speak to the Gardner Edgerton board president about it, as well as they're kind of approaching a bond issue and maybe getting support there. So we'll see. We got to have a little more than just us trying to change.
DeSoto too. I mean, DeSoto should be planning for growth as well.
Let's hope they are. Anyone else? Any other reports? Okay. All right, moving on to the superintendent's report.
Few items. Like I said, our school year does continue to go well. We finished up day 19 today. I did especially want to take some time and kind of be a little bit serious. And that is the fact that, I definitely want to say to our patrons out there, our parents especially, that it's always disheartening to hear, tragedies that we occur in other school districts, especially, like the one that, unfortunately occurred last week in Georgia. And, it's important that we all always stay diligent, that we stay proactive. And I can say without a doubt to anyone out there that USD230 has definitely over the years been very proactive in keeping student and staff safety, at the forefront. It was in my first year here early in the fall when Mr. Elliott came to me and said, we could do more. And there's this system out there called Centegix. It's pricey, but it could really make a difference. And I remember we brought that to the board. It was an expense. But, we implemented that in August of 2023. It took months of preparation. And it's worked out really, really well. And then I think it was, Nicole was telling me that heard on the news after George's, that school that had the shooting last week, they attribute that it could have been a lot worse had they had implemented Centegix, the same system, but this school year. Okay. So again, I just want to say, our district does take that seriously. We invest in it. We also, again, could we, whenever you could maybe make some reductions here and there, you got to figure out in then what is truly best for the kids. And, this district has always made that decision, even if it costs a little bit of money, if it's the best thing for kids, school safety, if it's the best thing for kids, smaller class sizes, they do their best to try and make that happen. And I know that I can speak for the entire Board of Education because I know that they have a collective commitment to be at the forefront of always having and implementing the best practices that pertain to student and staff safety. I can tell you for a fact that our students do and our staff do conduct drills on safety in terms of what to do in certain situations where student and staff safety is threatened. I get automatic updates anytime they're doing a drill or whenever there is a call out where they're putting the building and the students in a hold for whatever reason for a period of time. Okay. It is part of our culture. It's part of our routine. But like anything else, that doesn't just happen by chance. And we will continue without a doubt to make sure that we are always doing all we can to prevent, but if something would happen, that we minimize any unfortunate event that could happen. And again, I just want our patrons to know, because like every time there's a tragedy, I know I do get parents just concerned, hey, what are you doing? And I want to assure them that, yes, we are, and we're going to continue that. And I also plan to address a little bit of that in my next edition of LinkedIn goes out this Friday. And so I plan to spend a little bit of portion kind of on that soapbox. But again, I applaud the Board of Education again for over the years, and the new board has definitely carried that on of investing to make sure that our students and staff stay safe. Moving on then into a couple more items, we, in collaboration with DLR, we are going to be commencing, as I said, a series of engagement meetings over the course of the next couple months in an effort to determine what is the best path forward in managing our growth so that we can maintain the high quality programming and services that our patrons expect as well as appreciate. And there's going to be more information on that in the process. In fact, we're doing an internal executive team of educators and teachers and principals tomorrow afternoon. And then after that, in about 2 weeks is whenever we actually kick off another meeting with our visioning committee, which is going to be comprised of a lot of stakeholders, parents, and different individuals. And then that's going to move forward through a series of meetings into October. And then at sometime in November, we hope that DLR can bring to the board, hey, this is kind of what's come out of those meetings. And you can at that time, we'll have some decisions that, that will need to be made. I will say that, I did ask if the board want to be involved at any level. I know that you can go both sides with that. For the education team piece, which is a smaller group that actually meets tomorrow for just a brief time, teachers, principals, we do put that out there. Was anyone interested? We did have a couple board members that said they would definitely like to commit to be a part of that process. So those individuals will also kind of have some information and insight whenever the big recommendations get delivered later on, that they can share some perspective as to, how those things may have come about and maybe why maybe something didn't get included in the final recommendation. So that's my superintendent's report.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Luttrell. All right. We do need an executive session tonight.
Madam President, I move the board go into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel to protect the privacy interests of and identify individuals under COMA. Those to be in session include Board of Education members, superintendent of schools, and other administrators as requested. the executive session to begin at 7:40 with the open meeting resuming at 8:30, no later than 8:30 at this place.
Second.
All right, there's a motion, a second. Any discussion? All right, Rachel, please take the vote.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell, Mrs.
Yes.
Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Hole,
Yes.
Mrs. Baker,
Yes.
approved.
And 15 minutes, starting at 8:30, ending at no later than 8:45. Oh, sorry, I came up. Somebody second.
Second.
Hold on. Who seconded?
Nicole, can I do that?
Yes.
You can do whatever you want. Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Chitwood,
Yes.
approved.
Adjourned.